when I use the term ABBT. I use the term ABBT like we would use the term CBT. So it's an overarching sort of umbrella term. It's not, ABBT is not yet another approach to add to the list. It's an overarching term that encompasses a number of different therapies, including things like ACT, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, MBCT, MBSR, mindfulness-based sort of anything, DBT, and so on. I think all kind of fall under this umbrella. And they have a lot of differences, these approaches, but they also have some similarities. So what are the common features across all of these approaches? First, and again, if you're familiar with MBCT and ACT, you've heard this before, but it's critical. It's really the relationship that we have to our internal experiences, to our physiological sensations, the memories we have, our thoughts and our emotions, our worries. It's the relationship we have with those experiences that's thought to be sort of the thing that causes and maintains the problems that we see in our clinical practice, not the content itself. So we're not going to talk about how anxiety in and of itself is problematic. We're not going to try to get rid of worries. Worry is a part of, being human, and we'll talk about why that is in a few moments or a little bit later this morning. But it's that relationship that we're going to be working on changing. So what kind of relationship specifically do we think people have, people who are carrying a diagnosis of anxiety disorder, to their internal content? Well, we think they have a very narrowed attention. So there's a lot of things happening in a person's experience, but they're sort of narrowly focused on threat cues. It's a critical judgmental response. So we're going to talk a lot about emotions and why we have emotions and how all our emotions are helpful and adaptive. Folks with anxiety disorders, they maybe don't feel that way about their anxiety. They're very critical and judgmental about feelings when they arise, and thoughts and physiological sensations as well. We also think that problematic relationship has to do with fusion. And fusion is basically that idea that thoughts and physiological sensations and emotions and so on are somehow defining us in some way. That would be a fused relationship. So I may have the thought, I'm worried about, where my son's going to get into college. And if I recognize that as a thought, that might sort of come and go. But if I have a fused relationship with my thoughts and I have that thought, I might feel really worried about it. What does it mean that I'm worried about my son? Am I not confident enough? I'm terrified about this. I'm a terrible mother for having this worry. It feels very defining, not something that's kind of coming and going. And then the final sort of characteristic of that wonderful relationship, that problematic relationship that many people have with their internal content, is avoidance. As it makes sense, and we'll talk more about this, if I feel critical about my thoughts and I'm worried that if I have a negative thought, it's defining me in some way, then I'm going to want to avoid that thought as much as possible. So it's these characteristics of the relationship that people have to their internal experiences that are thought to be at the core of what's causing and maintaining an anxiety disorder. Okay. So again, I'm talking about what's the sort of key characteristics or shared characteristics of ABBT. And all of these approaches integrate in some way strategies that are aimed at sort of enhancing acceptance and perhaps teaching mindfulness to change that relationship. So where there's a narrowed attention towards threat, we're going to work on trying to broaden attention. That's a feature of mindfulness. We broaden attention. We're going to work on cultivating an accepting and sort of compassionate stance towards those thoughts and feelings when they arise. We're going to work on creating diffusion, so allowing or sort of helping people to cultivate a stance from which thoughts and emotions and sensations are seen as just events or experiences that arise rather than as a defining feature of someone's personality. And we're going to increase willingness, so that people are sort of willing to go into their life, to jump into their life, even if it means shaking up some of these painful thoughts and feelings in the service of sort of, living a fuller life. Now, some ABBTs also